You see that fat peony bud right there? The one that swelled up like a marble, full of promise, and then turned brown and crispy before it ever opened? That's our first clue. Behind me stand 10 perennials that have survived 25 years in my garden. I trust every single one of them. But here's the truth I don't tell many people. Almost all of them nearly died on me first. And the reason wasn't drought, wasn't bugs, wasn't bad luck. I misread the warning signs for years. One spring, I stood over my grandmother's peony, absolutely certain the ants crawling on it were eating it alive. I was wrong. And that one mistake nearly cost me a plant older than I am. So by the end of this, you're going to read your own plants, the way the Royal Horticultural Society finally taught me to. And I'll hand you the one buried fix. The real reason strong perennials suddenly fail. That almost nobody gets right. This works on the plant you've grown for 15 years, not just the ones you bought last week. Let me start with that peony, because it's the plant that broke my heart and then taught me everything. When my grandmother passed, I dug up her peony and moved it to my own border. I was so proud. And then, nothing. 3 springs in a row, it pushed up leaves, formed those beautiful round buds, and every bud browned and died without opening a single petal. Gardeners have a name for this. They call it bud blast. And most people, me included back then, blame the ants. Here's what's really happening. In a cool, wet spring, a fungus called botrytis moves in and rots those buds from the outside while they're still tight. You'll see a gray, fuzzy film in the worst cases, or the bud just goes soft and brown and hangs its head. It looks like something is eating it. It isn't. It's moisture sitting on crowded, airless stems. The fix is calmer than you'd think. I cut off every blasted bud the moment I see it, right down into healthy stem, and I get it out of the garden. I never compost it because the spores overwinter and come back. Then, and this is the part people skip, I cut my peony foliage down to the ground in autumn, every leaf, and I clear it away. The Royal Horticultural Society has recommended that autumn cleanup for peonies for generations, because botrytis lives on old leaves through winter and reinfects the fresh buds in spring. So that solved part of my mystery, but not all of it. Because even in dry, healthy years, my grandmother's peonies still refused to bloom, and the ants were still there, marching up every stem. I'll come back to those ants, because the real answer genuinely shocked me, and it changed how I plant every perennial I own. Therefore, let me move to the plant that fooled me next, the hosta. You know, the story everyone tells about hostas. Holes in the leaves, blame the slugs, put down some beer, and yes, slugs love hostas. But let me show you the symptom that fooled me for a whole summer, because it looked like slug damage and it wasn't. My biggest hosta, a blue one I'd grown for 8 years, started yellowing from the base. The outer leaves went limp and flat, like wet paper. And when I gave one a gentle tug, a whole fan of leaves lifted away in my hand, with a soft, rotten smell at the base. That is not slugs. That is crown rot, or what growers call petiole rot, a fungus that sits right at the soil line where the leaf stalks meet the crown. The University of Minnesota Extension pins this on one thing more than any other: mulch and wet debris piled up against the crown. I had done exactly that. I'd mounded bark right up to the stems to keep them moist, and I'd smothered them. The fix took me 10 minutes. I pulled every scrap of mulch back, a good 2 inches away from the crown, so air could reach the base. I cut out the mushy leaves, and on the plants I could see white, thread-like fungal growth on. I lifted them entirely, trimmed away the rot, and replanted in a drier, brighter spot. For actual slugs, I stopped messing with beer traps and switched to iron phosphate pellets, which are safe around pets and birds, scattered thinly at dusk when the slugs come out. That hosta came back the next spring, fuller than ever. So I felt clever. I thought I'd learned to read my plants. But then my daylilies started sending me a message I completely ignored, and this one is about the passage of time. The daylily is on my list of 10 because it is as close to bulletproof as a perennial gets. Drought, clay, neglect, deer nibbling, it shrugs it all off. But reliable does not mean immortal, and that's the trap. My oldest orange daylily clump began blooming less and less. Fewer scapes, smaller flowers, and a strange bald patch right in the middle of the clump, with all the healthy growth pushed out to a ring around the edge. I assumed it was tired soil, so I fed it. Nothing changed. That dead center is the plant begging to be divided. Daylilies grow outward from the middle, and after about 4 or 5 years, the old crown in the center simply gives up, starving itself in its own crowd. The Missouri Botanical Garden recommends lifting and splitting daylilies every 3 to 5 years for exactly this reason. So one autumn, I dug the whole clump, sliced it into 4 fist-sized pieces with a sharp spade, threw away the exhausted middle, and replanted the young outer sections. The next summer, I had 3 times the flowers. That same lesson, a plant telling me its age through its shape, showed up next in 2 of my favorite edging plants. And here's where I learned a trick with a very English name that saved me hours of staking. I'm talking about catmint and salvia. Number 4 and number 5 on my list, both of them give you this glorious first flush of blue and purple in early summer. And then, right when you're proud of them, they flop. They split open in the middle, fall onto the path, and leave an ugly bare hole where the flowers used to be. For years I staked them, tied them, fought them. It looked terrible. The answer is a technique called the Chelsea chop, named after the Chelsea Flower Show, because the timing lines up with that show in late May here in the UK. Late May into early June, before they flower, I take shears and cut catmint and salvia back by about 1/3 to 1/2. It feels brutal. You're cutting off growth that looks perfectly healthy, but the plant responds by branching low and dense, so it blooms a little later on shorter, sturdier stems that never flop. And with catmint especially, once that first flush fades, I shear the whole plant back hard by half again, and it rewards me with a second full bloom in late summer. Karl Forster, the great German nurseryman, built his whole reputation on perennials that stand up on their own without staking, and this is how you get that look from plants that would otherwise sprawl. One pass with the shears in May. That's it. So now I could keep my low plants tidy. But the flopping problem had one more disguise, and this one nearly convinced me to throw a perfectly good plant on the compost heap. Meet number 6. Sedum, the kind people call autumn joy, with those big broccoli-like heads that turn dusty pink in autumn. Mine did something that made no sense. In midsummer, it opened up from the center like a broken umbrella, the stems splaying outward flat on the ground with a gaping hole in the middle. My first instinct was that it was thirsty and hungry. So I watered it more, and I fed it. And it got worse. Much worse. Here's the mystery solved, and it's the opposite of what you'd guess. Sedum flops when it's spoiled. Too much water, soil that's too rich, or too much shade makes it grow soft, tall, and weak. This is a plant that evolved on dry, lean, sun-baked ground. The more I pampered it, the floppier it got. The fix was to stop being so kind. I give it full sun and poor soil now, and I never feed it. And I give it the Chelsea chop too, cutting it back by half in late spring, which keeps it compact and self-supporting. Piet Udolph, the designer behind the New York Highline plantings, leaves sedum standing all winter for its structure and the way frost catches those seed heads. And you can only do that with strong, unfed stems that don't collapse. So flopping, it turns out, was never one problem. It was the plant telling me something specific each time. And I was finally learning to listen. And that lesson, learning to read your plants instead of guessing, is exactly what led me to put everything I know into writing. I've spent years pulling these diagnoses together into a series of digital books, First Bloom, Deep Roots, and the Full Bloom System that walk you through exactly this kind of plant reading, symptom by symptom, season by season. If you've ever stood over a struggling perennial and felt completely lost, the Full Bloom System in particular was written for that moment. All 3 are linked in the description, and you can get started today for $67. Now, back to those warning signs your plants have been trying to show you all along. But then one of my coneflowers grew a flower so strange, so wrong, that for a moment I thought I'd imagined it, and this clue carries the highest stakes of anything I've shown you so far. Coneflower, echinacea, is number 7, and it's a magnet for bees and goldfinches. But one August, I found a bloom where the central cone had erupted into a tuft of small, deformed, greenish leafy growths, like the flower was trying to turn back into a plant. Other blooms came out twisted, lopsided, sickly yellow-green. It was one of the strangest things I'd ever seen in my garden. That is a disease called Aster yellows. It's not a normal fungus you can spray away. It's caused by a phytoplasma, a bacteria-like organism, and it's spread from plant to plant by tiny sap-sucking insects called leafhoppers. There is no cure, and here is why the stakes are so high. If you leave that infected plant in the ground, the leafhoppers carry it straight to your other coneflowers, your rudbeckia, even your marigolds. So the fix is hard but simple. The moment you see that green, tufted, deformed flower, you dig the entire plant out, roots and all, and you destroy it. You do not compost it. I lost one coneflower that way, and by acting fast, I saved the rest of the bed. Every extension service I've read, from Minnesota to the RHS, says the same thing: remove and destroy. It feels drastic, it's the only thing that works. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're looking at your own border, at a plant you've grown for 10 or 15 years, one that's already looking rough, already half collapsed in the center, and you're wondering if it's simply too late, if you've already lost it. This next part is for you specifically. Because I have revived plants I was certain were finished, and I want you to try before you ever dig one out for good. The single most powerful rescue I know for a tired, established perennial is division, and autumn is the moment to do it in most of our gardens. If your daylily, your hosta, your hardy geranium, or your catmint has that dead, woody, empty center with all the life pushed to the outside, that plant is not dying. It's overcrowded and starving itself. Lift the whole clump on a cool, damp day. Wash or shake off enough soil that you can see the crown, then take 2 garden forks back to back, or a sharp spade, and split it into pieces the size of your fist, each with healthy roots and several growing points. Throw the exhausted middle away without guilt. Replant the young outer sections at the same depth they were, water them in, and mulch lightly, keeping that mulch off the crown, the way I learned the hard way with my hosta. A plant you thought was in its final year can come back the next spring with more flowers than it's had in a decade. I've watched a 15-year-old geranium do exactly that. But there is one plant on my list you must never treat this way, and knowing the difference is everything. That plant is number 8, false indigo, or baptisia. This is a native prairie perennial with blue-green foliage and spires of blue, pea-like flowers, and it lives for decades. But it does something that makes impatient gardeners give up. For the first 2, sometimes 3 years, it barely does anything. Tiny, sparse, almost embarrassing. People assume it's failing and dig it out. It isn't failing, it's building. Baptisia sends down a deep, powerful taproot before it ever puts on a show above ground. And once that root is established, the plant becomes an unmovable, drought-proof anchor that outlives most things in the border. The RHS is blunt about it. Baptisia resents disturbance and should be left undivided and unmoved. So this is the one where the rescue is to do nothing. Feed it patience, not fertilizer. Wait for year 3, and it will reward you for the next 30. Therefore, the lesson kept turning. Sometimes you divide, sometimes you wait, and reading, which is the whole skill. Let me give you number 9, the hardy geranium, the cranesbill, not the red pot geranium, but the tough perennial ground cover kind. This plant fills gaps, smothers, weeds, and flowers for weeks, but by midsummer it often goes leggy, tired, and yellow, with sprawling stems and hardly a flower left. Most people think it's done for the year. It isn't. This is the easiest rescue in the whole garden. I take shears and cut the entire plant right down, almost to the ground, as hard as I dare. It looks shocking for about 10 days. Then it pushes out a fresh mound of clean new leaves and, on many varieties, a whole second flush of flowers. One brutal haircut in July buys you a beautiful plant again by August. And number 10 is astilbe, with those feathery plumes of pink and cream and red that light up a shady, damp corner. But astilbe sends a warning that people constantly misread. The leaf edges go brown and crispy, curling and scorched looking, and gardeners assume it's a disease or a fungus and reach for a spray. It's almost never disease. It's thirst. Astilbe has shallow roots and no drought tolerance whatsoever. Those crispy brown edges are the plant drying out, usually because it's getting too much sun or the soil dries between waterings. The fix is moisture and shade, not chemicals. I moved mine into deeper shade, mulched to hold water, and never let the ground go bone dry. And the scorching stopped. Give astilbe consistent damp soil, and it's one of the most trouble-free plants you can grow. So there they are. My 10, peony, hosta, daylily, catmint, salvia, sedum, coneflower, baptisia, hardy geranium, and astilbe. 10 plants I will grow for the rest of my life, because each one taught me to read a specific warning sign instead of guessing. But I still owe you the ending of the mystery I opened with. Those ants on my grandmother's peony, the buds that browned and died even in dry years, the plant that refused to bloom no matter what I did. This is the buried truth, the one that got covered over by bad advice for generations, and once you know it, you'll never lose a peony again. Let me kill the myth first, because it's the loudest one in all of gardening. The ants are not hurting your peony. They are not eating the buds. They are not stopping it from opening. Peony buds produce a sweet nectar along the outside, and the ants simply come to drink it. The University of Minnesota Extension and the Missouri Botanical Garden both say this plainly. The relationship is harmless. You never need to spray those ants, and killing them does absolutely nothing for your blooms. I wasted 2 years fighting an insect that was innocent the whole time. So what was actually stopping my grandmother's peony from flowering, year after year? The answer was in the soil, at the crown, where I couldn't see it. When I moved that peony, I planted it too deep, and a peony planted even an inch or two too deep will grow leaves forever and never ever bloom. Here is the exact number that changed everything for me. The RHS and every peony society agree. The pink growing buds on the crown, what they call the eyes, must sit no more than 1 to 2 inches below the soil surface, 2.5 to 5 centimeters. That's it. Plant them deeper, and the plant simply will not flower. And the second most common reason, especially in older gardens, is that over the years, soil and mulch slowly build up over the crown and bury those eyes, so a peony that once bloomed beautifully quietly stops. I had done both. I'd planted deep, and then I'd mulched on top, year after year, smothering it further. The fix I want you to do this autumn takes 15 minutes. In September or October, gently dig around your peony and lift the crown. Look for those eyes, the fat pink buds. Replant so they sit just 1 to 2 inches under the surface, no deeper, in a sunny spot, and scrape any built-up mulch away from the crown. Then be patient through one settling year. The spring after I finally did this, my grandmother's peony opened its first flower in 4 years. A huge, blowsy, pale pink bloom in the same garden she would have loved. I stood there and honestly, I cried a little. The truth had been there the whole time, written in old society journals and extension pages, buried under the noise about ants. Careful growers kept it alive. And now you have it too. So here's what I really want you to take away. You are not a bad gardener when a plant struggles. You just haven't been shown how to read it yet. And now you can. The brown bud, the flopping stem, the crispy edge, the dead center, the green deformed flower, every one of those is your plant telling you exactly what it needs. You're the kind of gardener who refuses to give up on a plant you've poured years into, and that's the only kind of gardener worth being. So tell me one thing in the comments. Which symptom did you spot on your own plant? Was it the peony buds that browned and never opened, the sedum that flopped open in the middle, or the coneflower with those strange green tufted blooms? Write it down below, tell me which plant it was, and tell me where in the world you're gardening from. I read every single one, and I'll help you diagnose it. And if you want to garden alongside people who are learning to read their plants instead of guessing, come join us. Subscribe and stay. Because next time I'm opening the case of the hydrangea that grows lush and green every summer and refuses to give you a single flower, and the pruning mistake that quietly cuts your blooms off before they ever form. You won't want to miss that one. Before you go, if this video helped, there's a deeper version waiting for our members. You can ask me your own question and a real person answers, and you'll be among thousands of folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes less than a minute and you can cancel anytime, no risk. Now that you've picked your perennials, there's one simple thing to do each June that keeps them blooming beautifully all season long. I'll show you exactly how, right here. Let's get started together.